One of the drawbacks that we don't have out of the box yet with Modern SharePoint is the ability to save a site as a template. The good news is there's an easy way to accomplish that. It's going to take a little PowerShell, but the maintenance story is beautiful. You can manage your master site in the UI, extract an XML file, apply that to a brand new site to get a one-for-one mirror image on your new site. Very little configuration, very little manual work. A lot to unpack here. PowerShell, site template, script. Here we go. Let's get started. Okay, so this is where we're going to do a semi-automated process to provision these sites. So just a quick recap, we received a site request from our requester because our SharePoint governance is a request service model versus a self-service model. So each site collection or each site needs to be provisioned. And part of that is because we control the templates, naming convention, and other governance requirements. So with that, if you look at this site, this project site, this represents the master site. And this is not in use. This is really a template. It has placeholders for folders. You could potentially put views in the document. There is, in the document library, there's a host of lists and libraries behind the scenes that kind of make this hum, make this work. As you can see, there is a landing page with web parts configured, and we want to replicate this for a particular project site for external access. So in order to do that, the first thing we want to do is to go to the main site and create a subsite. And this is going to be the manual piece of it. So I just go new here and create subsite, give it a name following the naming convention. Now, because this is a subsite, this is not going to have our standard modern SharePoint site templates, but rather a mix or hodgepodge between classic and modern. So the best that they can do is give me this classic site structure with a modern UI, but it would not come with the Microsoft 365 group. That's what this template notation or template title is telling me. When they get to the permission section, our requirements require that each subsite has unique permissioning, though there may be core groups that will have access, so I need to select this. And from a navigation perspective, my modern setup or my modern configuration for this subsite is going to be enable navigation on the left, but I'm going to say no to the other options as far as navigation settings and inheritance. Once I hit create, now I have my SharePoint group options. I'm going to just go ahead and let it do its default setting, click OK. And now I have a subsite with a modern UI or a modern look and feel, but is a far cry from what my standard project template should look like for this type of site. And that's where the PowerShell comes in. So now for the PowerShell piece, we're going to use, I'm a big fan for Windows PowerShell ISE. So we're going to use that to get started. And we're also going to use the PNP PowerShell module. Now, the PNP PowerShell module, you can just install this simply by using this command here. Now what we can do, we can run a test script just to ensure that we can connect to Office 365 and get access to our website. Okay, so to do that, what I want to do, I want to bring in the editor. And and I love this interface because it allows me to execute PowerShell, then I can see the results here, and I can save it, and then just kind of run this through several tests. So the first thing we want to do is to set a variable to our URL, and this should be in quotes. So we're going to treat that as a string. So I have this information there. Now I want to do my PNP connect. And if, this is another confirmation that the module was installed successfully because I'm able to leverage IntelliSense when and where possible by just holding down the control key and hitting the space bar that forces the IntelliSense to come up. So when I connect to PnP Online, here's the other piece. The other piece is I'm gonna use this switch called interactive. This gives me an opportunity to prompt a web browser, put in my Office 365 credentials. If MFA is enabled, it then allows me to go through that process to authorize the connection with my authenticator app. So once I connect, the next line I want to do is the disconnect. And this is really just to ensure I don't forget it and I don't have any pending sessions open. Everything else is going to be in the middle. And here I'm going to just simply do a right host. Okay, so now I should be able to execute this, authenticate using my Office 365 credentials. So here I didn't really confirm that I'm connected to the web, so I'm able to execute this line with 0 error. So from a syntax perspective, it seems like I'm okay, but I would like to get some type of feedback from Office 365 ensuring that I actually have the right object. So I can take this test to another level by saving the web into a local variable and then simply reading out the web title of the web instance. And here at the bottom, this is the warm and fuzzy confirmation that I was looking for, to where it has "Ya connected," and then it reads out the title. So now I'm comfortable that we are connected, the module is installed, and we're ready to rock and roll. So once I do this, what I want to do is start to save off some of these scripts so that way it makes them reusable, and also it probably will streamline my experience with my authentication. So I'm going to just create a folder, just call it code, and I'm going to just call this the test script. Okay, so now that we're connected, let's go ahead and get down to business with exporting the template for our master site and then importing that template XML into a newly created provisioned site. So the first thing I love to do, and you can use whatever strategy that works best for you, I love to separate the two. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually save this current file as my export. And to save this as an export, you have the command. Now I'm connected. I don't necessarily need this anymore. I don't necessarily need this piece anymore. So the command is very simple. It's get PnP site template, and I specify where I want the XML to be saved. Now, if I leave this as is without specifying a path, it actually will save this XML in the Windows System 32, pretty much buried, but where PowerShell, where this PowerShell exe actually execute, not necessarily where the PS1 script lives, but actually where the PowerShell engine lives, which is kind of buried under the Windows System 32, so on and so forth. So I don't want this buried there. So here I'm gonna specify a fully qualified path to put it in an area to where I can easily reference it and actually interact with it if needed. So here I would just go to my, let's just do my D drive. No, let's do C drive. So I'm gonna do C drive, and I have my code folder. That's where all my PowerShell scripting will live. And then I would create another folder. Let's just call this the site templates. And then I will create one for projects in external. So this is actually an external project. And notice how what I'm doing, I'm using these directories because as I scale this up, I want to create a folder for all my different site templates, because each template may have different configuration options, and of course the XML. So as we kind of play this out, and you'll see all the assets needed for a site template, you will see how this all works together. So for now, let's just go ahead and create this folder, and now I can just copy this path, go back to my XML, and then just tell it this is where I want to store that XML. So as of right now, I want to walk you through the different stages of this. So as of right now, we should be good to go with connecting to this URL, which is the site, which in this, again, this is going to be my main master site. It's going to grab all that information, create the template, and then dump that into this XML. and then I can create another step. So if I execute this, okay, so I paused the video, but that took probably around 35 seconds or so to export that site into XML. And again, that's just the export step of this process. So now if I go to my directory structure, oh, that did not save in the right location. Oh, I forgot the slash. That's my fault. So here I can re-execute that to get this in the right position. Okay, so now the second attempt is executed. Now that I have the right path specified, I can now look at, I don't need this. That was a misfire. So now if I look into my folder structure, I should be able to see, and this is going to be my XML document. And if I want to scan this very quickly, here you can see, and before we would have to either use a generator or create something like this by hand, which you can see because of the detail and the syntax required in this is very error prone. So the fact that we are now able to generate this XML using a PowerShell script with just a few lines is a breath of fresh air. Now, before we move forward, I do want to call out, this is going to be what you can consider the kitchen sink. There's another option in here that allows me to specify the config of exactly what I want from this master site as my template to be applied to all of my subsites or newly created site. And there's another option called configuration. And this is just, again, looking for a path to a config file. So let's go ahead and create that now. Now, in order to do this, again, as I mentioned before, this is a freshly minted Windows 10 machine. So now what I have to do, I want to show my extensions so that way I have better control over the file types that I'm creating, because this config file needs to be in JSON format. So now what we can do, we can now open this and then apply our configuration needed for our site template. I have this configuration saved in a previous, on a second screen that's not in view for this video. But in this configuration file, here you can view this schema URL, see exactly all the configuration options that you have. But very quickly, just scanning through this, and it's not, as you can see, it's not that long, and it's not that complex as well. But basically, there are several handlers that you can tell the export process that you want to bring out. And because I am doing this with a subsite, I don't want any changes to the site collection that the subsite is within. So I'm removing the site settings. But if I was doing a site collection to site collection, then I would want to bring over the settings at the site collection level. This is going to bring over all the lists within that master site, all the web settings from a web perspective, not a site perspective. So if you're dealing with a site collection, this would be everything at the root web versus the site collection, what in this context will be treated as a container of all webs or subsites within it. This will bring over all the pages. If I have any custom fields defined on the list or libraries that I'm bringing over, the fields handler will bring all that information over. Navigation will bring the navigation. In our context, we're only dealing with the local nav, not the global nav or the hub navigation. If I'm bringing over a file library, this will bring over the files as well as any files created in the site pages library. Now, once we get to pages, you can see that we're specifying some other configuration settings to include or not include author information. In our case, we do not. We do want to exclude. That's kind of a double negative, right? So we want to exclude author information for the pages that we bring over. We want our current site to inherit that or have full control over. We do want to bring over site pages that are part of our web. And then when we get to the list, understand that when this notation of list includes both libraries and SharePoint lists, just because from a code perspective, they're treated one and the same. So I do want to bring that information over. And from there, I have a custom events list. I want to bring details over for that. I have a custom photo library. I want to bring details over for that. I'm missing a comma there, so I have to be very careful with the syntax to make sure that I'm adhering to the JSON structure and syntax guidelines for JSON in general. And then as far as the document library, I want to bring information over for that. Notice that the flag for each one of these lists and libraries is set to true, because I not only do I want the container in the schema of the events list, I also, if there are events, because I may have sample events to kind of help show them what needs to be changed or updated, I do want to include that. And the same is true for my document library. I actually have a sample folder structure, and in some cases a sample document as a template for a status report or things along those lines. I want those new sites to come over with that folder structure and with those sample templates. Lastly but not least, these last three configuration settings, when it comes to the navigation, we know that subsites come with a default navigation link. I want those to be removed completely and then apply my navigation structure that I have defined in my master site. For as far as asset files, we know that when you create modern pages and you add images, all of those are going to be stored in the asset files. I need those to come over so that way I don't have broken image references within my site pages. So that's why I have this set to true. And as far as security, I'm gonna actually say no to this, because I don't want, if there's security groups created at that master site, I don't want those to come over. I want to use the groups that were created for my subsite. So there is no transition. There's no need for me to bring over the security settings from the master site. I want to control that net new in my subsite. So these are the core requirements I have for my project template, and understand that these are not, and I repeat, these are not all of the options you have. There are a lot of more options. And again, I'm referring you to the schema URL so that way you can view that. So now that I have that pasted over, I'm gonna just go ahead and save this. So this is gonna be my config JSON, and now in my PowerShell, I want to be able to reference it. Okay, so now I'm using the IntelliSense to kind of drill down to my folder, to my file, and now I should be able to execute this again. Now notice what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna leave this XML name the exact same, and I should get a prompt if confirming that I do want to override it, or else I can just give this a different name, and then that way I can have both versions. Here's the confirmation if I want to overwrite the existing XML. And in our case, because we are being very clear and precise on what we want that XML to bring down, I want to say yes. Okay, so now that the export is complete, now we can create our script for the import. So to do this script for the import, all I'm gonna do is save this and just change the name. Okay, so now that we have the import, we have to change our URL to make sure that we're only applying to the newly created site, and that's going to be this one here. So I want to grab that reference, go back to my PowerShell, update the URL. This is the site I want the template to be applied to. The command for the import, instead of the get site template, is going to be the invoke PNP site template. And the invoke does not have a configuration script or switch. And instead of the out switch for the path, it still want to point to the XML, but it's just going to have a path switch versus an output. Now, if I have everything, all my syntax together, this should work as expected. And now I can just execute the script. Okay, so now that's done. I paused the video, and that took probably around 90 seconds to apply the import. And again, these site templates are not that complex. So for larger sites or more complex sites that may have several pages or even a lot more data that you're exporting with your template, we can just expect the time to vary based on the complexity and the load of the site. Okay, so now is the moment of truth. We can compare our sites. So I have my master site here in this tab, And then I have my newly created site in this tab. And now I'm about to select refresh for the very first time. And just like that, it's very magical how much of the information from our main site came over to our project site. So here I have my left navigation linked up, my path, and here's the most important piece. The URLs are relative to this site. And as we kind of look through this a little bit closely, you can see that my page came over, all of my quick links came over, my web part was configured as expected, my embedded document library came over as expected. Again, if I'm comparing this to what we have here, I even have some of the quick charting that came over and is still configured. The same is true for your team. I have these defaulted to these 3 members, our team members, where they will be the contact for the client for this particular location. And now the site owner, our project owner, can come through and then make these her own with the right configuration setting. Another thing to take a look at, if I look at behind the scenes on what was actually brought over in the site contents, and again, comparing this with my master site. So here's my master site. Remember, my master site is going to be the site title with 999. And then my newly created site, we're going to have the site title ending in 444. If I click a little bit deeper into my document library, again, this is my master site, and then I go to the document library here, I have the folder structure. And if I click in meetings, remember I said that I have a template. So now that the project manager for this newly created site has a template of what the status report should be like, the format for the status reports, and the key information they need to report on within the status report. Again, this has a really good story. The last thing I want to add in closing is that you notice that I split this into 2 separate PowerShell scripts, one for the export and one for the import. The reason for that is that when I come to the import piece, I don't have to go through the export as long as I don't have any changes in my master site that I need to apply. And that enables me to move a little bit faster with my site provisioning process. So again, if I walk through this process again to where I'm stepping through and creating the subsite, so creating a new subsite, again, selecting the same permissioning and my same navigation strategy that's meant for modern subsite pages. Again, I'm still okay with the unique permissionings for my SharePoint groups. And now all I need to do is take this site, because I'm separated in my PowerShell scripting to where my import and export are separated. I can now simply just go in, update my URL, and execute the script. And just like that, within 90 seconds, however long it takes for the PowerShell script to execute, I now have my newly created site, 222. After I hit refresh, it's ready to rock and roll with the site template and primed and configured with the baseline for these project sites. Again, very powerful tool. It may take some setup to get it going, but once it's up and running, you should be, as a SharePoint administrator, you should be able to knock these out pretty quickly. Coming up, the story doesn't end there. So what we want to do now is, I showed you a semi-automated, and for most of us, this may be fine. And this may be way better than manually configuring these sites, especially for a request service SharePoint governing model. Ideally, we would like to have this entire process work without any human interaction, and that's going to be in our next video. How do you execute this exact same PowerShell script using an Azure function and in an unattended fashion, and also being triggered by our Power Automate process? Any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, or fill out our Power App and Power Platform Ideal form. That link is right here in the description. Until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.